He left everything to my stepmother, the same woman who made my mom drink herself to death. They say funerals are where the truth shows up late, overdressed, and still reeks of whatever hell it crawled out of. That was my father's funeral. Polished mahogany coffin, white lilies, a crowd too big for the life he actually lived. I stood at the back, my hands clenched so tightly my nails left crescents in my palms. Everyone acted like he was a goddamn hero, a respected businessman, a loving husband, a pillar of the community. But none of those people had watched what he did to my mother. None of them had to pour her into bed while she sobbed about how he looked right through her like she was a ghost. None of them sat in a hospital waiting room at 2 a.m. because she drank herself into unconsciousness again. And they sure as hell didn't know about the woman sitting in the front pew, dressed in black like she was in mourning. Margaret, my father's second wife. My stepmother. The woman who moved into our house while my mother was still alive. Who told her, to her face, if you had done your job right, I wouldn't be here. Yeah, that Margaret. I wasn't surprised she was sitting front and center like some grieving widow. What caught me off guard was the smug little smile she shot me when our eyes met. Like she knew something I didn't. And that's when the first seed of dread planted itself in my gut. After the service, I stayed back. Everyone else filtered off to the reception, the casseroles, and awkward small talk. I didn't want their condolences. I wanted answers. Dad had promised me the house. It was in writing, or so I thought. He said it to my face a year before he died, back when he thought cancer was a scare and not a sentence. You'll get the house, he told me. And the business. You've earned it. That was before Margaret started coming to doctor's appointments. Before she started answering his phone. Before my calls started going to voicemail. I should have known. I showed up to the reading of the will with a lawyer friend, just in case. There were 6 of us in the room. Margaret, her greasy lawyer, me, my friend Sarah, and 2 estate witnesses. The lawyer cleared his throat, opened the manila folder, and started reading. By paragraph 3, my mouth went dry. By paragraph 5, my hands were shaking. By the end, I was so numb I didn't feel the chair underneath me. Everything, the house, the cars, the business, the savings, the stocks, even the family heirlooms, all of it went to Margaret. I got nothing. Not even a damn watch. Margaret dabbed fake tears with a silk handkerchief and said, I know this isn't what he discussed with you, but he changed his mind. Closer to the end. He said you were too impulsive. Impulsive. I walked out before I said something that would have put me in jail. Sarah followed, trying to say something reassuring, but I couldn't hear over the roar in my head. I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard like it might give me some answers. And that's when I remembered something. My father hated lawyers. Hated paperwork. Hated changing documents. If he updated that will, someone had to push him. And that someone lived in his house now. Drove his car. Owned the company I spent a decade helping build. She made my mother drink herself to death. And now she was drinking champagne with what was supposed to be mine. No, not hers. This wasn't over. The next morning, I drove back to the house. Not to the guest house where I stayed the last few times I visited, but the main property. The one I was supposed to inherit. The one with the blood-red shutters and the smell of cedar that hit you the second you walked through the front door. It was locked. Naturally. Margaret had changed the codes. Probably the locks, too. But I still had the gate remote, and it got me through the wrought iron fence like I belonged. I stood there in the driveway for a full minute, just staring up at the house like it was a ghost. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Maybe it never really was. I didn't come to beg. I came for answers. So I rang the bell. Margaret opened the door wearing satin pajamas and holding a cup of coffee like she was starring in some Netflix drama about rich widows and their secrets. Her eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. Well, if it isn't the prodigal son, she said, stepping back slightly. Come to contest the will. I ignored the jab. Can we talk? She sipped her coffee, slow and deliberate. You're already talking. Inside. She stared at me for a second too long, then finally turned and walked into the house, leaving the door open behind her. I stepped into what used to be home. It was cleaner than I remembered. Colder. All the warmth, the clutter, the photos of my childhood, gone. Replaced by sleek furniture and expensive art prints. Margaret's touch. She sank into a white leather armchair like she owned the world. And now, technically she did. What do you want, really? She asked. I want to know when he changed the will. She didn't flinch. 6 months ago. That's funny, I said. Because 6 months ago, he could barely write his name. Margaret's smile tightened. Are you suggesting something, or just airing your grief? I took a step forward. I'm saying he wouldn't have updated anything unless someone put a pen in his hand and guided it. Her face stayed neutral, but her fingers twitched, barely. Enough to catch it. I loved your father, she said. I was there when you weren't. I was building his company. I snapped. The same one you now own. Her eyes narrowed. No, the same one he gave me. There's a difference. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because part of me knew she was right. Not morally, but legally. She stood, brushed imaginary lint from her sleeve, and walked to the kitchen. If you're done, I have a meeting in 20 minutes. I followed. You know he promised it to me. She turned. He promised a lot of things. To a lot of people. Doesn't mean he followed through. And just like that, I saw it. The shift in her tone. The flicker of something dark under the surface. She wanted me to fight. Because she knew I'd lose. And she'd enjoy every second of watching me do it. I took a long breath. I'm going to find out what really happened. I don't care how long it takes. She leaned against the counter, smiling like a cat with feathers in its mouth. Good luck with that. Just don't bankrupt yourself in the process. I turned to leave, but as I passed the hall closet, something caught my eye. A box. Unlabeled. Plain. But the kind my father used to keep all his personal files in. And Margaret hadn't noticed me noticing it. So yeah, I'd be back. But not to knock. Next time, I wouldn't be ringing the bell. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the box. The size of it. The way it was tucked away like something she didn't want seen, but couldn't bring herself to destroy. Sarah called twice. I ignored both. Instead, I pulled out a yellow notepad and started making a list. People, places, loose ends. I needed to know who my father saw in those final 6 months. Doctors, lawyers, nurses. Especially the ones Margaret didn't know I knew. I started with Dr. Kessler. He was Dad's primary physician for over a decade. A no-nonsense guy with a comb-over and a handshake that felt like concrete. His receptionist remembered me. She didn't ask questions when I said I wanted to talk. Dr. Kessler met me in a side room, not his office. Probably to keep it off the books. I shouldn't be telling you any of this, he said, closing the door behind him. But I liked your father. And I didn't like what happened near the end. That got my attention. Go on, I said. He sighed. Around the time he updated his will, he wasn't himself. His memory was slipping. Paranoia. Confusion. I wanted him evaluated. Margaret refused. She refused a neurological eval? She said it would stress him out. Said he was just tired. But I've seen early onset vascular dementia. I'd bet money he had it. I leaned forward. So, you don't think he was capable of making major legal decisions? Dr. Kessler looked at me for a long time. Then, quietly, not without help, my stomach turned. That was the first real crack. The first professional confirmation that something was off. Next, I called Eleanor, Dad's old office manager. She left the company after Margaret took over, said she couldn't work with her. I always thought it was just ego. But now, when I told her what happened, there was a long silence. I figured something was up, she said. Margaret had me scan all of your dad's old documents, then delete the originals. Told me it was for digitization, but she wouldn't let me archive the scans myself. What kind of documents? Contracts, personal letters, a few handwritten notes. Looked like estate stuff. But the weirdest part was, your dad's signature kept changing. Changing how? Shaky, uneven, like someone was guiding his hand. I even joked about it once. Margaret said he was just tired. Told me not to mention it again. Jesus. I hung up and stared at the wall. 2 different sources now. 2 different red flags. One thing was becoming clear. If Margaret did manipulate him, she left fingerprints. And I was going to find them. But first, I needed that box. Breaking into the house wasn't as hard as it should have been. The gate remote still worked. The side door to the garage still had the same faulty lock. It was 2:14 a.m. when I stepped into the hallway where the box sat. The house was dark, silent, too quiet. Margaret must have been sleeping or gone. I didn't care. I had 10 minutes, maybe less. I opened the closet slowly. There it was, on the shelf. Same box. I grabbed it, took it to the garage, opened it on the hood of my old Jeep, still sitting in the corner like a forgotten relic. Inside were dozens of folders, bank statements, legal docs, one manila envelope labeled, in my father's unmistakable block handwriting. Private, not for Margaret. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, a letter. 2 pages. Signed. Dated 8 months ago. It started. To whoever finds this, I'm writing this because I'm scared I'm being pushed into things I don't fully understand. And then came the sentence that made my heart stop. If anything I've signed in the last year contradicts what I've said before, please know it was not my will. It was hers. I looked up, chest heaving. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. And the war had just begun. I sat in my car for a long time, the letter still trembling in my hands. My father's words felt like a ghost gripping my shoulder. This wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. Emotional, financial, and maybe even legal. Margaret hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She had stolen his voice. By the time the sun came up, I had scanned every page of the letter, photographed the envelope, and hid the original in a fireproof lockbox at my apartment. If Margaret suspected I had it, she'd burn down the house before letting me expose her. Sarah finally showed up at noon. She let herself in with her spare key and found me hunched over my laptop, eyes bloodshot, surrounded by empty coffee cups. "Jesus, you look like you lost a fight with a blender," she said. "Worse, Margaret." She sat down, and I slid the scanned images toward her. Her expression shifted from concern to disbelief to something cold and focused. "This is huge. If a court sees this, we could crack the whole thing open." Sarah nodded. "But we need more. One letter isn't enough. If we go after her now, she'll spin it. Say he was confused, that he wrote it in a moment of dementia. Which is why we get his medical records," I said. Sarah blinked. "Those are sealed. Not if we challenge the will and claim he wasn't of sound mind. Then a judge can unseal them. And if he was of sound mind, then I lose everything." Sarah hesitated. "You sure about this?" I wasn't, until I saw his handwriting. That letter? That was Dad. Clear as day. We spent the next 48 hours building the case. Sarah called in favors from her old law firm. I compiled statements from Eleanor and Dr. Kessler. We started piecing together a timeline. Every appointment, every change, every document Margaret touched. And then we got lucky. One of the junior nurses at Dad's hospice center replied to Sarah's inquiry. Said she remembered seeing Margaret whispering to the notary who came in to finalize the will. A notary who, according to her, never actually saw Dad read the document. He just nodded when she pointed to the line, the nurse said. Didn't even lift the pen himself. Margaret held his hand. That was it. That was the nail. We filed the formal challenge 3 days later. Margaret didn't respond. Not right away, but I knew it wouldn't stay quiet long. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed from front to back. For tires slashed. A dead rose duct taped to the windshield. Subtle. Sarah stayed calm, said it was a good sign. She's scared. That's why she's sloppy. But I couldn't relax. I kept waiting for the hammer to drop. Then it did. A week later, I came home to find a woman sitting on my doorstep. Gray suit. Perfect posture. Binder in her lap. "Mr. Langston? I'm Margaret's lawyer." I didn't invite her in. She didn't ask. "My client would like to propose a private settlement," she said. "I'm listening." She opened the binder and turned it toward me. It was a check. Mid-6 figures. More than I expected. "All you have to do," she said, "is drop the claim. No court. No scandal. No further action." I stared at the check. Then I looked her in the eye. "Tell your client," I said. "She just confirmed everything we already knew. And I'm not for sale." I walked inside. Behind me, the lawyer didn't even argue. Just packed up and left. Because we both knew. If I kept going, she was going to lose everything. I didn't go to the cops. Not yet. I wasn't stupid. A letter in a box, even in my dad's own handwriting, wasn't enough to win in court. Especially not against someone like Margaret, who'd already charmed half the probate lawyers in town. No, I needed more. I needed to connect the dots. Build a timeline. Show the manipulation wasn't just emotional. It was legal, strategic, fraudulent. So I made a new list. Banks, lawyers, witnesses, and the notary, who notarized the will. That was the next crack I was chasing. Because if Dad was slipping, mentally, physically, then the notary was either complicit or clueless. Either way, I needed to find them. Turns out, the will had been notarized at a small firm on the edge of town. One of those one-floor buildings with flickering fluorescent lights and cheap carpet that smells like mildew and lemon cleaner. The notary was a woman in her early 40s. Cheryl. Nervous. Fidgety. When I introduced myself, she went pale. "Oh, you're his son," she said. I didn't like the way she said that. "You notarized my father's updated will." I did, yes. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Did he seem lucid that day?" Her eyes flicked to the hallway, like someone might be watching. I don't think I'm supposed to answer that. You notarized a legal document. That gives you some responsibility. Did he seem like he understood what he was signing?" She bit her lip. "Honestly, no. He was shaking. Kept asking Margaret to explain things. I asked if he was okay to proceed. She said he just had a bad reaction to a new medication. That made me freeze. What medication?" Cheryl shook her head. "I don't know." She kept talking over him. Honestly, I felt off about the whole thing. But I didn't want to accuse her of anything. She's persuasive. I thanked her and left. My fists clenched the whole walk to the car. It was coming together now. The fog, the confusion, the way Dad kept deferring to her. Margaret had isolated him, blurred the lines, pushed him to sign documents he didn't even understand. And nobody stopped her. Not the notary, not the lawyer, not even me. That night, I called Sarah, told her everything. The letter, the doctor, Cheryl. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "This is elder abuse." The words hit like a freight train. I'd been so deep in the weeds, chasing paper trails and shady signatures, I hadn't called it what it was. Abuse. Psychological. Financial. Legal. And suddenly, I saw it all differently. Not just as a betrayal, but as a crime. Sarah offered to connect me with a legal advocate who handled elder fraud cases. Someone outside the local system. Someone who wouldn't fold the second Margaret flashed a smile. I agreed. The next morning, we met with a guy named Clayton. Late 50s. Wore a BOLO tie and cowboy boots. Didn't say much for the first 10 minutes. Just read through my notes and the letter. Then he looked up. "You got more than you think," he said. "And if even half of this holds up, we can blow this thing wide open." He tapped the second page of the letter. "This here? This is what we call a contemporaneous objection. It tells a court your father didn't agree with what he was signing, even if he signed it." I exhaled. Finally, someone who saw it. Clayton leaned back. "We start by filing an injunction to freeze the estate. If the court agrees your father wasn't of sound mind or was under duress, we can contest the entire will. But we'll need to move fast. Margaret will fight tooth and nail." "Let her," I said. "I'm not backing down." Clayton nodded. "Then buckle up. This is going to get ugly." And he wasn't wrong, because 3 days later, I got served. A cease and desist. From Margaret, claiming I broke into her home, stole private property, threatened her peace of mind. And just like that, the real war began. Margaret's cease and desist didn't scare me. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. I'd hit a nerve. She wanted me afraid, wanted me second-guessing every move. But I wasn't backing down. Clayton wasn't fazed either. "She's trying to paint you as unstable," he said. "Classic intimidation tactic. But it won't hold." He filed the injunction that same afternoon. The judge granted a temporary freeze on the estate, pending review. That meant Margaret couldn't sell off assets, cash in investments, or move money. Not yet. I pictured her reaction when she got the call. Good. Let her sweat. But I knew she wouldn't sit idle. And I was right. The next hit came quietly. My credit cards started getting declined. My business account was frozen, pending review. Then a letter arrived from the bank my dad used, the same one I'd worked with for years. It said I was being investigated for potential identity fraud. Margaret was playing dirty. She was weaponizing her new status, using her legal ownership of the business to pull the rug out from under me. And it was working. I had employees, payroll, clients. And suddenly, I couldn't pay anyone. I sat in my office, lights off, staring at a stack of unpaid invoices and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. I was sinking. Fast. Sarah came by that night. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, hands in her lap. Then she said, "She's trying to drown you." "Yeah, and it's working." "No," she said firmly. "You've got something she doesn't." I looked at her. "A conscience," I said, half laughing. She shook her head. "Proof." We spent the next few days building our case. Clayton brought in a forensic handwriting analyst to verify my dad's letter. He pulled medical records, tracked Margaret's visits, mapped the decline. And then, something unexpected happened. We got a call from a man named Gerald. Said he used to be my dad's attorney, until Margaret fired him. I heard about the injunction, he said. Figured it was time I spoke up. He met us the next day at a diner off Route 4. Wore a trench coat like some noir character out of a forgotten movie. But his words were sharp. Your father didn't want to change the will, he said bluntly. He told me so. But Margaret was relentless. She kept pushing. When I pushed back, she replaced me. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Those are the drafts. The original estate plan. Your name's all over it. Until 6 months ago. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. There it was. My name. My role. My inheritance. Gone. All at once, in the final version. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Sarah asked. He hesitated. Honestly. Fear. Margaret's connected. And I didn't want to end up on the wrong end of a lawsuit. But seeing what she's doing to you. I couldn't stay quiet. Another crack in her fortress. Clayton was ecstatic. This is the turning point, he said. It's no longer your word against hers. We have timelines. Testimony. A professional trail of manipulation. But we still needed one more thing. A witness. Someone who saw her pressuring him. Someone who could say, under oath, that she coerced a dying man into rewriting his life. I knew who that was. The hospice nurse. Dad had one in his final weeks. A quiet woman named Maria. She was kind, gentle, came by after hours to sit with him when I couldn't. I tracked her down. She remembered me, remembered Dad, and she remembered Margaret. She didn't like me being alone with him, Maria said. Always hovered, always intercepted his mail. One time, she found a card he wrote. It had your name on it. She ripped it up and threw it in the trash. Would you be willing to testify to that? I asked. Maria looked me dead in the eyes. Yes, he deserved better. I left her house that night with a folder full of statements and a phone full of evidence. Margaret thought she'd buried the truth, but all she'd done was give me a shovel. The hearing date came faster than I expected. By then, Clayton had assembled a case that looked less like a family dispute and more like a criminal investigation. We had the letter, the nurse's testimony, the doctor's suspicions, the disbarred attorney's file, and a forensic analyst ready to testify that my father's final signature didn't match any of the others on record. And Margaret? She lawyered up. Big firm. Sharp suits. Smug expressions. They tried to stall, delay, discredit. Called my claims an emotional reaction from a disgruntled son with no legal footing. But the judge wasn't buying it. Not anymore. The courtroom was cold. Sterile. Smelled like coffee and disinfectant. Margaret sat across from me, perfectly composed. Morning chic. Pearl necklace. Widow in black. She didn't look at me once. But when the judge entered, I saw her eyes twitch. She was nervous, and that gave me oxygen. Clayton opened with the letter. He read it slowly, clearly, every word landing like a hammer on stone. Then came Dr. Kessler. He testified about the memory loss, the confusion, the refusal of a neuro-eval. When asked if my father was of sound mind when the will was changed, he didn't flinch. No, he wasn't. Margaret's lawyers objected, said it was speculative, but the judge allowed it. Then came Cheryl, the notary. Her hands trembled as she described the day she witnessed the will. She said Margaret rushed the process, dominated the conversation, overrode my father's questions. He looked scared, she said, like he didn't know what was happening. Then came the bombshell. Gerald, the disbarred attorney, pulled out the original drafts. This was your father's plan for over a decade, he said. His son would inherit the house, the business, the legacy. Margaret didn't even enter the picture until the last revision, the one done under questionable mental capacity. Margaret's team tried to cross-examine, tried to paint Gerald as disgraced and bitter, but the documents didn't lie. Then Maria took the stand. She described how Margaret controlled every aspect of my father's final weeks, how she monitored visitors, redirected mail, and destroyed anything that looked like it came from me. I once heard him whisper, "I want to talk to my son," Maria said, voice soft but clear. Margaret told him, "You don't need him anymore." The room went silent. Even the court reporter paused. That was the moment everything shifted. When it was Margaret's turn to testify, her mask cracked. She tried to play the grieving wife, but the facade didn't hold. Not under pressure. She slipped. She said my father had already given enough to me, that she deserved something for putting up with him. That's what she said. Putting up with him. Clayton pounced. So you believe you were owed his entire estate because you endured his illness? Margaret didn't answer. The judge asked her to clarify. She stammered, fumbled, and then tried to pivot. But it was too late. That sentence hung in the air like rot. The judge recessed for the day. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I could breathe again. Not because it was over, but because for the first time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. The next morning, the decision came in writing. The court found sufficient evidence that my father had not been of sound mind when the will was updated, and that Margaret had exerted undue influence. The will was declared invalid. The original estate plan, the one with my name on it, was reinstated. I was getting everything back. The house, the business, my father's legacy. But more than that, I got the truth. And Margaret? She walked out of the courtroom with nothing but a handbag and a frozen smile. But I wasn't done yet. Because a civil suit was next. Margaret didn't look at me when she left the courtroom. Didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just walked out like a statue. Stiff, silent, perfectly composed. But I saw her fingers twitching around the handle of her handbag. That was the only tell. She was crumbling inside. But I wasn't satisfied. Winning the estate wasn't justice. It was just reclamation. I wanted something more permanent. I wanted her exposed. Held accountable. I didn't want her to slink off to some gated community in Palm Springs and tell people she graciously let it go. So I filed a civil suit. Elder abuse. Fraud. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. The day the papers were served, I got a call from her new attorney, some aggressive shark out of Phoenix. Your actions are vindictive and without merit, he said. We'll be filing a countersuit for harassment. I laughed. Good, I said. Tell her to pack a toothbrush. Clayton advised caution. Civil cases are long. Messy. They drain you. Financially. Emotionally. I'm already drained, I told him. But if she walks away with no consequences, this whole thing was just damage control. So we moved forward. Discovery was brutal. Margaret's team stalled, dodged, dragged their feet at every turn. But we had the receipts. Emails. Phone records. Voicemails from my father, left at 3 a.m., sounding scared. Confused. We had Maria's journal entries. Notes from Dr. Kessler. Gerald's timeline. And we had the letter. The night before the trial, I sat on the porch of the house I grew up in, the one she almost stole from me, and read it again. If anything I've signed in the last year contradicts what I've said before, please know it was not my will. It was hers. I could still hear his voice in my head. Not the weak, fading one from the end. The one from my childhood. Strong. Steady. Commanding. He built everything we had with his bare hands. He taught me how to work, how to lead, how to be accountable. And in the end, he tried to warn me. Even when his voice was being drowned out. Day one of the civil trial, Margaret showed up in another black dress, like she was still mourning. Like that would buy her sympathy. This time, it didn't. She took the stand on day 3. Said she loved my father. Said she only did what she thought he wanted. Then Clayton played the voicemail. It was scratchy, garbled, but clear enough. I think she's making me sign something. I don't want to. Please call me back. Silence in the courtroom. Margaret's face went pale. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. I looked straight at her. She finally looked back. And in that moment, the hate vanished. I didn't see a villain. I saw a scared, bitter woman who tried to rewrite someone else's legacy and failed. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. We won. The court awarded punitive damages. Enough to make sure Margaret would never be comfortable again. Not in this town. Not in any town that ran a background check. But the money didn't matter. What mattered was the record. The truth, carved into court transcripts, media write-ups, and her own reputation. She could never spin it again. After the verdict, I went home. To the real home. The one with cedar in the walls and memories in every floorboard. I sat in Dad's old recliner, stared out the window, and felt something I hadn't in months. Stillness. Not peace exactly, but something close. Sarah came by later that night. She didn't ask what came next. She just poured 2 glasses of bourbon and sat beside me in silence. And in that silence, I finally felt what victory really meant. Not revenge, just closure. I'd buried the lie and brought my father's name back into the light. A month after the civil trial ended, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Handwritten. Just my name, in cursive that looked almost too neat to be real. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. Heavy paper. Expensive. And the message? You think you won. But we both know what you lost. No signature. No proof. But I knew it was her. Margaret wasn't done. Not really. People like her rarely accept defeat. They don't know how to sit still in the ruins they create. They look for ways to claw back, to rewrite the narrative, to turn your victory into just another chapter in their long, bitter autobiography. But here's the thing. I didn't care anymore. She could throw stones from whatever rental condo she'd slithered into. She could tell her version to whoever was willing to listen. She could dress in black for the rest of her life and claim she was the victim. It didn't matter. The truth was on paper, in court records, in people's memories, in my father's letter, and in the house, the one I finally moved back into. I spent the next few weeks tearing down everything she'd installed. The modern fixtures, the soulless decor, the photos she'd framed of her and Dad at charity events he probably never wanted to attend. I replaced them with old family pictures, repainted the walls, even found a carpenter to restore the creaky floorboard in the hallway I used to hide under as a kid. One night, while cleaning out the attic, I found a small tin box tucked behind an old suitcase. Inside were receipts, notes, photographs, all of them from the year after the divorce. There were letters from my father to my mother, ones I never knew existed. One stood out. "I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you needed, but I will never stop being the father he deserves." I sat there for a long time with that note in my hand. It didn't fix everything. Didn't erase the nights I found Mom passed out or the birthdays Dad missed. But it told me one thing. He tried. Even when he failed, even when he chose silence over confrontation, he knew. He felt it. And in his own broken way, he never stopped caring. That was enough for me. Now, when I walk through the halls of this house, I don't see ghosts anymore. I see memories. I see roots. I see a legacy I fought like hell to reclaim. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to let someone rewrite a man's life with a signature forged in fear. Margaret can keep her letter. Let her live with the knowledge that the story she tried to steal now lives where it belongs. Here, with me. And every morning I wake up in this house, I remember. He trusted me. He warned me. And in the end, I was the one who listened.